Mm. Hey y'all, welcome to the Devon A. Morris Unfiltered call-in show. Have a seat. Let's get ready. You have any questions? Come on, call in. Come on to that Discord channel. Do me a favor, get the unfiltered crew some finger snaps. We're ready to get started here. Mondays, 8 p.m. Every single Monday, we're here. I'm excited about it. Are you? Let's get this show started, y'all. The greatest Scrum show on earth. I'll see y'all soon. Enjoy. Mm. Hey y'all, welcome to the Devon A. Morris Unfiltered call-in show. Okay, let's make sure we live. My apologies, everyone. I don't know what happened. Everything just froze up on me for that time being. So that's my apologies. Technology. It's a little dark where I am, but just know I'm out here working and doing stuff. So you can hear me now. Before it all froze on me. I mean, it literally froze on me. But that's okay. We're on another show. Welcome, 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 welcome to the Unfiltered Call-In Show, where we talk about Scrum, Agile, entrepreneurship. If you want to talk about that, while I answer your questions related to Scrum and Agile. That's what we do. So, y'all, I am having an amazing week. Today's topic is going to be about retrospectives, and I'm going to give you the format of at least the most classic retrospective that I know, and then we can talk through elements of that. And then maybe in the future I'll give you some tips about retrospectives. But we're gonna break down, kind of what the retrospective should really be about. Now, just so you know, if you've never been here before, we answer your questions related to Scrum and Agile. Period. If you have questions, you ultimately will drop them in the chat, or you're welcome to join live on the show. Join live on the show. I'll throw my headphones on so we don't get any feedback. But on that note, let me know how you're doing. Say hello to me, all this other type of stuff. I want to give shout outs, so make sure you do that because I want to make sure that I shout out to people that's normally here. I see all my normal people here, like Patrick. How you doing, brother? How's it going? The week is good, man. The week is good. I'm over traveling. I'm a little south of you right now, brother. I really am. I'm over in NYC, brother. So I'm over here just making things happen. But yeah, just getting things done, as you all know. Let's see. I got Asha. I know y'all couldn't hear me earlier, but I was having technical difficulties, but that's all right. We in the motion. We're moving right now. So how you doing? Asia. Asha. I always have troubles with your name, right? But that's okay. I still love you dearly, okay? And Petra, how you doing? How's it going, Petra? We had a good conversation, Petra. Hopefully you have implemented some of the things that we talked about. I remember that conversation. I remember you having one of those kind of moments like that. It was fun. So on that note, we're kind of solid. We're good to go. So we're gonna make things happen like we're supposed to. So since I lost a little bit of time, I am going to almost jump right into the topic. Hey Chucks, how you doing? How's it going? I'm doing good, man. I really am. I'm amazing. I just got off a family meeting. My family always gets together and we do things. So we got on Zoom today. So it was just amazing. It's just a beautiful thing. So it's nice to have a nice, supportive family, and I absolutely love it, right? Absolutely love it. So that's a good thing. And I see something really amazing here. Petra is saying, that mind-blowing thing that we talked about a few weeks ago, she's saying she's implemented it. Hopefully it's working out. Yeah, you're going to have some resistance. We always have resistance, right? But hopefully that's working out for you, so that's a good thing. I'm glad to see that you're implementing it. So we'll hopefully have more of that good kind of stuff happening in the future. But here's the deal. Since I was a little bit later than expected because I had the technical difficulties, but it at least did a good thing for me. It allowed me to resume where we're at, and I didn't have to just kick everything out. I thought I was gonna have to start this whole thing over. So today's topic is a really simple topic. It's about the retrospective, and I'm gonna talk to you from the sprint retrospective perspective. Now, just so then we're all on the same page, let's talk about the basics. And then maybe we'll talk about a format or some typical formats that I've seen utilized for the retrospective. Now, first and foremost, no matter how you look at Agile or Scrum or any of these frameworks whatsoever, they usually have a moment to reflect, take a look at what's been done, and figure out how you're going to get better. There's usually a moment for that. Even the Agile Manifesto, I believe on a 12th principle, actually mentions taking a little bit of time to retrospect. So if you're living and breathing the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto, you're at least going to retrospect. Okay, you're at least going to take a moment and just take heed, take a look back, see how things are going, and try to get better. So you'll see that in the retrospective for sure. However, in Scrum gives you a few parameters associated with the retrospective, like you should have it once a sprint. Now, if you think about the parameters with the retrospective, it's about finding ways to utilize Scrum to help improve everything moving forward, right? Scrum Master should facilitate that. You'll find it mostly your developers are given a lot of the information, the product owner should be involved, so you'll find those people definitely involved. You don't want to invite any outside parties because, again, you don't show your dirty laundry to people outside of the retrospective, right? And so here's the deal. The retrospective happens at the end of the sprint before the sprint is over, okay? So the last event is classically what you'll see. So the last day of the sprint, again, it's a Friday if you start on Mondays or whatever. Your last day of your sprint is when you're going to actually have that retrospective. Now, the thing about it is that for a 2-week sprint, a retrospective is supposed to be maximum time box of an hour and a half. But it takes about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how you decide to structure them. And so for me, I normally lean about the 45-minute time frame to what it happens in reality for me. And what you're talking about, the real input is, what happened during the sprint from a process perspective. And then your output is going to likely be improvements. Now, the thing is that those improvements are important because a lot of times people come out with improvements and they don't improve much afterwards, right? And so the question becomes, why don't people really continue or try to continue to have this retrospective? Why does retrospectives classically fall off, right? And so my question for you all that are here, just to help everybody else out, right? You have been involved in a retrospective before, and you have likely have had teams who don't want to do retrospectives anymore. Can you drop some reasons in the chat why you've seen teams that you have experienced, literally teams that you've experienced that do not want to do a retrospective anymore? Drop a few of those in the chat. Just one per entry in the chat or per comment in the chat. If you do that, that would be absolutely amazing for me, right? Because I don't just want it to be just my ideas or what I've seen. I want it to be quite a few people's ideas, right? So what have you seen in terms of overall what happens and why people stop doing the actual retrospective? The statement is, should they stop doing a retrospective? Should teams in general stop doing the retrospective? No. Obviously, that's a no. Are there times when it gets a little redundant, boring? Yeah, but you can have an impact on that. You can have a definite impact on that, right? And with you having an impact on that, that will have a huge impact on how you move forward, right? And so it is one of those things where people just classically find reasons to not have it, especially after about 3 sprints. Teams stop having retros, right? But a retro isn't a complicated thing, right? All it really is at the end of the sprint, you talk about what's good, what didn't go so good, and how you're going to improve. That's the most basics of a retrospective. You don't even have to make it fancy, right? You really don't have to make it fancy. Now, I've seen all kinds of ways that people do retrospectives, but let's talk first about some of the reasons why teams don't have them, right? Patrick says we get it right this sprint and delivered, and can we get on next one, please, right? So really, we've gotten it right this sprint. We've delivered. Let's just get on to moving to the next sprint, right? That's definitely a reason. I've seen teams literally say everything's perfect. We're good. We didn't have any real problems. We delivered. Let's just move on, right? I want to get to this next thing, right? Let's see. At first, the team was shy about sharing, but I told them that this was a safe space and this was a way to make our lives better. Well, let me assume you said something before that, right? I have facilitated retrospective after each sprint, and we have seen many improvements over the past year. Yeah, I don't get any pushback on this one, so that's good. I mean, you're having a good one because a lot of teams fall off on that retrospective. That's just truth, right? Let's see. Asia here says they were tired of all the meetings and they feel it was repetitive, right? And that right there, this comment right here, is probably one of the most common comments. Except I'll add one thing to it, right? Along with this, I'll add to it that a lot of times I find that the developers no longer want to have retrospectives because they don't see anything changing. They don't see any improvements having happened. And since they don't see any improvements having happened, they don't want to do it anymore, right? They're sitting here and nothing has changed whatsoever. And the truth of the matter is, the retrospective is for that team to get better. A lot of times I find that teams are talking about things that they have no control over, or their retrospective items are not actionable. Okay? So, if I was to give you, if you pull back the anatomy of what a retrospective is, you're going to talk about good, you're going to talk about bad, and you're going to find a way to improve. This improvement part is where people get this thing wrong, okay? And so realistically, it doesn't matter how you do it, right? As long as you really talk about goods, bads, and what you're going to do to get better. You can call it stop. You can call it whatever, stop, continue, stop, get better at, whatever people call them, right? So people have all kinds of ways to do retrospectives. Proud, sorries, how you're going to get better. So it's just goods, bads, how you're going to improve, right? And so realistically, if you have those 3 elements, you classically got a retro, right? But here's the deal. The key to a retrospective, that's the most important part of it, is you coming up with actionable action items. Now, when I say actionable action items, and this is the key to your retrospective, I am really talking about making sure that when you come up with whatever that improvement is, that it isn't something that is super generic. Like, for example, we have bad communication. Okay? That right there is not actionable. What's actionable is how are you going to make communication better? So, how are you going to take this thing right here that we said is not a good thing, and what are you going to do to make it better? And what you have to do ultimately is you have to make sure that when you pick that actionable thing, that you also make sure that it's something that is small enough to be completed in a single sprint. Because if you've broken it down into bite-sized pieces that the team can actually get done, then you have a higher likelihood of them having more transparency, having a way to put those things in a sprint. So then you can show that we're having improvements step by step over time. And you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to have that happen, right? So it's not good enough to say, hey, communication is bad. The real statement is communication is bad. What are we going to do to improve it? Now, here's the deal. It should be actionable. And when I say actionable, there's some things that are actionable that are in the team's control, and there are some that are not, right? You want to definitely concentrate on the things that are in the team's control. Because if it's in the team's control, then guess what? You can commit to that. You can work on that. If it's not in the team's control, then it's out of the scope of the team. That becomes something that any person that's helping a team, like a scrum master, can actually utilize to help them get better in the future. Okay? So really, really important in terms of this, right? Really important way we want to step forward. Really important way in terms of how we want to deal with this, right? So when you think about that retrospective, you really have to take a step back. Now, here's a question for you all that's here, just to help everybody else out. When you think about a retrospective, give me one thing that made your retrospective really amazing. Some of you have had some really good retrospectives, but if you had one tip to give the world about making your retrospective like the perfect retrospective, a really good retrospective, what would that be? What would that thing actually be? Okay? I would love for you to drop that in the chat. I just want just one tip. One tip on what you think will be helpful for somebody who's struggling with a retrospective, who may not have any teams that really want to be in that retrospective, who've had it a few times and now the team's like, nah, that's okay. We don't want to do this anymore, right? Or you just didn't get no value out of it, right? You know, you've been in this place before. A lot of you have been in this place before. So what tip would you actually give someone? Drop that tip in the chat, right? The number one tip I would give is to make sure that your items are actionable. Make sure that the actions that you have, the improvements coming out of it, is actionable. If there's one tip I would give you above everything else, is to make sure that whatever you're doing is completely actionable. If you make sure it's actionable, then you're in a good place. Oh boy, you're in a good place, right? You're in a good place because now you got things that you can commit to, and you can actually really truly actually work on, right? You know, and it's interesting because you know a lot of times with scrum masters or people who do improvements in general, they're not excited about the retrospective either. And if you're not excited about retros, then you know what? Your team's probably not going to be that excited either. And the good thing is you can find ways to change up your retrospectives and make it different, make it feel different. It doesn't always have to be the good, the bad, and how we're going to improve. You can always, you can find games to play, right? If you go to tastycupcakes.org or go out there and grab Luke Holman's collaborative game books, right? You can grab several resources that can help give you some ideas on what you want to do. Matter of fact, the number one resource that I've always used is Agile Retrospectives by Dan Larson and Esther Derby. That provides a 5-step process and gives you activities that you can do in each one of those steps that would actually help you to be able to formulate an amazing retrospective. So there are good resources out there. I've even gone as far as buying older books that are team building games. And with these older books, they're cheap, one, but two, they have lots and lots of different ways different activities that you can have. And I may need to modify them a little bit to make them fit today's world. But I have a lot of older resources that I just go and grab because sometimes the classics work just as good as anything else. Especially since back in the day they didn't have as many computers like we do today. As many tools for people to collaborate a little bit easier, and you just adapt those to the way they are today, and you end up with something that's pretty good. But in terms of people talking about a good tip, right? Let's see, making sure everyone contributes. allocate a few minutes to everyone and get them fully involved. Yeah, I would definitely recommend that. So if there's a recommendation, definitely that's a good recommendation, Patrick. I'd agree with that. Let's see, building good relationship with team members. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where when you actually have a good relationship with your team, they're usually a little bit freer to speak. They're usually more open to speak. So that's just another one of those good things. And then I got another one here. Make sure they are not penalized for being honest. Man, that's a really good one, right? Because at the end of the day, I've had people show up that wasn't supposed to be there, and it's really hard for teams to talk when they feel like they're gonna, especially when they feel like they may be penalized for whatever they're gonna say. So you got to make sure that that team feels protected. You got to make sure that you're in a place that's psychologically safe for them to be able to participate and get themselves involved in it. So these things are really, really good. I see another thing, sending links to the retrospective 2 days before so they can process their thoughts. Absolutely, especially in a virtual world, that might be very, very helpful for the team. And in the real world too, right? Face to face, having them think about what would make their work more efficient. Yeah, absolutely, right? Because that's really what the retrospective is about making things better. And making things better is a good thing. It's definitely a super duper extra duper plus. So I actually love all the suggestions. They are all wonderful and great suggestions. So that makes me excited because that means that you all have done many, 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 many of retrospectives, right? And so, if I was to just talk to you about the classic, well, I can save that, right? I think you got the basics of a retrospective down. So next week I'll pull out my retrospective. I have a retrospective that I do, and it's my default retrospective. I classically give it out in my CSM classes to people, but if somebody asks me to do a retrospective, there's a default retrospective that I go to. If I had a team I was working with all the time, then I'm gonna switch that up and change it all the time. But I have a default that I go through, and I'll go through that default with you all, in the future. But next week will probably be when we go through it. On that note, we have talked about our topic for the day. I'm curious if you have any questions about anything, right? If you have any questions about anything, this would be the time to either drop it in the chat, whatever your question is, or to come join us on the show. Now, if you plan to join us on the show, we're for some strange reason, I'm having this every other week thing that I've tried to solve with LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn folks are not here like they would normally be in the past, but there's not much I can do about that. It's just some reason not connecting between the systems. So that being said, you all are here. I dropped in the chat the link for the actual joining the show live. So if you want to join the show live, come join us and join the show live. I'm going to go ahead and get myself prepared for just in case you decide to do that, so then we can be good to go. Other than that, this retrospective thing is a good topic. I'm actually talking with a client, now. And, what's one of the things missing? Retrospective. It's retrospective, right? It seems to always be somewhat the retrospective. It seems the retrospective is always one of those things that goes and is not there and people just don't do for whatever reason. So if you have any questions about this topic or you have any questions about something else, I want you to take a moment and drop that in the chat. Let's talk about it, okay? If you're new to the show or you're just joining us, then do me a favor. Like it, subscribe to it, right? Subscribe to the show. Obviously, likes help us out tremendously. Subscriptions help us out as well. I think we've gotten ourselves to, in the 800s. So that's a good sign to be in the 800s. We may be at around 820, I don't know. Maybe 810, 820, something like that. But we're growing. We're growing, and we will continue to grow, especially if we get more of this content out. And continue talking about solid topics that people need to really talk about. Retrospective has never been the most exciting thing, but done right, it becomes one of your most valuable tools. It really does. One of your most valuable tools. Okay? So I find it to be super amazing. I find it to be just nothing but greatness. So yeah, you definitely want to make sure you continue to have retrospectives. So that being said, I'm gonna end that topic at that point, and let's go ahead and talk about what questions you have. I don't see anything dropping in the chat at this particular point in time, but you all are maybe thinking about it, and that's all right. I'm always doing work, as you know, so I'm over here working with folks, and you know, I'm gonna tell you one of the biggest problems I see is teams, even in today's world, not having retrospectives, and it really surprises me when I see it, because it's almost like I don't know what to do with that. I really don't know what to do with it. It's like, but you have a retrospective for a distinctive purpose, and that really distinctive purpose, you know, you're not really serving if you're not going to go ahead and just figure out how you're going to make that thing happen, right? So realistically, that retrospective is just is just I don't know how else or what else you do with it. But that being said, I got my floor open here. Uh, Patrick, Petra, my people that's here, what's going on with you? Tell me how your week is going. Tell me anything curious happening with you all, right? Nothing major curious happening for me. Um, you can see my you can see my background. I'm in a hotel. It's interesting. Um, when I got in here, I'm in New York, right? And man, I'm gonna tell you something that's crazy, right? Let me give you some details here. So, Petra, I'm still working on the actual website for the event. So the event is still going to happen on the 23rd and through the 25th. I am working on the website so people can actually register. That's what I'm working on at this particular time. So I should have this up by next weekend for sure. But I'm making sure that I have the proper way for you all to register and for us to be able to do what needs to be done. So, I don't have much more information than that, but I am putting together a website now. A lot of times, Petra, I like to do these things myself. I mean, I can have people do it for me, but I like to do it myself because I like to see what I just like to experience things, right? So this is one of those things where I want to think through every single word because it's important to me. And I mean, I hate to say it, but it's really about agile coaches, speakers, trainers, utilizing the love to serve people, getting paid to do this, right? And that right there is super exciting. That right there would have been something I would have went to when I was in my beginnings of my journey. I would have loved to have gone through something like that. So I'm just thinking to myself, what are all the things I can do to service you all during that time frame, and giving you so much information that you're solid and good. And then if you want to follow on, we can do that too. So yeah, just super amazing. I'm feeling good about it. Let's see. So that is still coming. Okay. I haven't changed the date or anything like that. It's still in the books for that weekend. So I'm feeling good about it. Let's see. My team is mostly composed of external vendors who I discovered are not 100% committed to the project. They're 10 to 50%. They continue to overcommit and have too much whip. Please share your advice. Well, here's the first thing I'm going to say to you, right? Because there's multiple pieces to this. There's multiple layers to that question, right? So let's peel the layers back for a second and make sure we're good, okay? So here's the deal. I'm going to attempt to do something here. I'm going to move your comment over here, and I can't make it big like I want to, so that's okay. I get the idea of what you're saying. Here's the deal, okay? Let's take this piece by piece because I want to make sure we're clear, right? So, first thing, okay? Vendors, okay? The question that you got to ask yourself, Miss Muhammad, is are you treating your vendors like vendors and they're black box? What I mean by black box is that you give them requirements, they spit requirements, they spit results out. Is that team? Um, if that's that team, it's not a whole lot you can do because they're managing their own process, and you give them the requirements that they need, they spit out what you need them to spit out, right? So are your vendors that way? If they're not, and they're working truly as a scrum team, then the next thing I'm going to ask you is this, right? They're working 10 to 50% on multiple projects, right? So, multitasking is the bane of our existence, right? When you're working on more than one thing, you end up losing something to context switching, or what we call multitasking. And that can be up to 20% when you're on two things. So now your vendors are working more time to get the same amount of work done because they're losing something in context switching. So that's problem number one, right? Now, management knows that this is a problem. Okay. Have you talked to management about the allocation of the team, right? Because realistically, who's in control of that allocation? Whoever's in control of that allocation, you should have a conversation with them. There could be legitimate reasons why they're doing it. Absolutely legitimate reasons. I mean, the structure of the organization could be something where this warrants that. It could be that they got too much work happening, right? Which could mean that's a different type of prioritization issue. It could be a lot of different things, right? But then you ask yourself the other question is they're taking on too much whip and still not getting stuff done, right? Now, when you say you're taking on too much whip, okay, Scrum doesn't have a concept of whip, Kanban does. But can you use whip limits for those people that don't understand? Whip, work in progress or work in process, right? Sometimes teams will say you can only work on 2 items at a time. And so if I got my 2 items, I can't take another item until one item is done, then I can take another one, right? So are your teams really utilizing whip limits? And if they are, then are you enforcing them? Are they enforcing them? Are they living and breathing to them? So I think a good thing that has been thrown out there by Patrick right here is something I think is definitely respectable. And that is simply a Kanban board with whip limits could help, right? Get working agreements in place as well. So I group both of those things that Patrick's saying there. I was going to mention working agreements first, but I'll talk about a Kanban board. A Kanban board is established to provide some transparency, right? Obviously, visibility. When you're doing Kanban, one of the objectives is to visualize the workflow, right? And you visualize the workflow, but in there you're supposed to have explicit policies. And one of your explicit policies is going to be, hey, we can have 2 people work on an item we can have one person work on 2 items at a time. So you can make those policies, right? But you can make those policies across anything. You can be on a waterfall project and really have whip limits, right? Completely have whip limits. So I agree that a Kanban board is a way to be visual, but again, a Kanban board isn't necessarily the same as a Scrum board. And then if you're working inside of a tool, all these things, can decrease your visibility, but at least you have an idea that exists. Another thing that Patrick said, which I respect completely, is going ahead and making sure that you include things like this in your working agreements. Some people like to call working agreements social contracts. Working agreements, social contracts, working agreements. I don't know the exact difference between them, but I know that they're similar in more ways than they're different. So the idea is that you can include something like that in your actual working agreements and your actual social contract, where we have these whip limits. And then you want to talk about them in your retrospective. You want to bring these up in your retrospective, right? If team members are violating this, then the question is, how do we enforce this as a team? You don't want to be the one policing them as a scrum master. You want them to police themselves, okay? So these are 2 ways you can go about tackling that. But unfortunately, you're going to have to get to the place where you're probably going to have to escalate because you have no control over how much work the team has been assigned to. And then, is this all coming out of one product backlog? Can this be prioritized as one product backlog? Are they working on a ton of defects, a ton of operational stuff? There's a ton of emergencies happening? Is there's a ton of technical debt? There's all kinds of questions. So when you ask what you ask, Ms. Muhammad, man, it's a loaded question. It really, really is. It is loaded big time, full of information there. But the idea is that there's ways to start chopping that up. There's ways to start thinking about it. Okay? So this is a good thing, right? It's not such a bad thing. But that's a really good question. I think there's ways to attack that. If I'm you, though, I would attack that by doing one thing at a time. By, as I would say, running experiments and figuring out what the real problem is and how you can solve that by peeling back the onion one layer at a time. So, and then you don't just do everything and then you don't know what really had the impact, right? You want to determine what's the impact, right? So it is what it is. It's truth, right? So that being said, good question. I really didn't. That's a good question, right? It happens. It happens. It happens more often than we want to admit. But it's just part of that truth, right? It really is part of that truth. So we do it. We work through it. We try to make it happen, but we don't try to make it happen. We make it happen, right? So other questions that you all may have. I'm gonna say once again to Patrick, that was a good response. Definitely an amazing response. That's one thing I love about having this community that we have, especially while the community is small like it is, right? It gives us the opportunity to share in a much more intimate way. I even though I dream of a day we have 100,000 people on this channel, I can only imagine what the comments will look like, right? I don't even know how I can keep up with them or read it. I would have to get some help, y'all. Y'all would have to come help me. I had to get some real volunteers. I mean, when they first started this show, we had volunteers, right? But I had to really get a bunch of volunteers at that point. And then we'd have to go from there, figure out how we're gonna work that system. We had Discord. We was rocking it, man. We really was. So it's a good thing. It's just one of these amazing things. So I love it. I love every single bit of it, and I'm just good. I'm really, really good. So yeah, yeah. So that being said, other questions that you all may have or may not have, because if you don't have any questions, I understand. We might shut it down for the day. But you are also welcome to join me on the actual uh, interview. It's been a while. I think the last person I had was Chuck's on here. No, no, no. It was Petra. Last person I had was Petra on here, and we had a good conversation or a good exchange at that particular point in time. I'll ask you all a different question. Matter of fact, how about you all help me out for the actual look? I'm trying to help people that like to serve other people get paid for that event, right? I'm calling it the bankable event. I like the word bankable. Am I crazy when I say bankable? I'm thinking success. A lot of people think money, but does that sound bank crazy? The bankable event? Am I on the right place? The bankable event. I be having all these thoughts, y'all. I really do be having a lot of thoughts, right? But I like the bankable event. I really, really do. That's probably the title I'm gonna go with. Or do y'all think I should have a different title? Is that too straightforward? The bankable event. I just like it because I think your skills should be bankable, right? I just do, and you need to find ways to capture people's attention, right? And I'm like, this is gonna be amazing. The bankable event, bankable 2023. That's what it's gonna be. The bankable event 2023. I like it, man. I just love it. I don't know why I love it. I just love it. It's all about life is not completely about getting paid, but life is about getting paid. And getting paid doesn't necessarily have to be financial. Really, at the end of the day, getting paid actually facilitates some other thing that you want to do ultimately. And for me, I know what it does for me, and we'll definitely talk about that during that event. But yeah, the bankable event, right? The bankable. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That's the objective. The objective is to, you know, bank them dang on skills, turn them into something, right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that is just what it is. So it's just truth. Yeah, this is a good thing. It's a good thing. Any other questions anyone have? Any other questions that anyone has? Any other questions? Because there's not. Let's see. Oh no, Asia. Here's the deal. On March 23rd, March 24th, and 25th, I'm gonna do a 3-day event called the Bankable Event 2023, where I am going to be working through a few things, but the primary objective is to help coaches, trainers, speakers that love to help people get outcomes, to love to serve people, get paid to do it. We're gonna be talking about that, okay? And so that's gonna happen March 23rd through the 25th. So, you know, and I think the price is for 3 days is going to be like $97. So um, that's what it's going to be, right? Um, and so it just, oh, the show last week. What was our topic last week? I don't remember what our topic was last week. But whatever it was, I'm glad it was on point. I'm glad you enjoyed it, right? I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's a plus. Um, how do you see AI altering the agile landscape? Man, that's a good question, man. I actually been thinking about that. How AI is going to alter the landscape. My, one of the fears that I have, with almost everything, right, is is things becoming commoditized because everybody can jump in and try to do things, and people using AI to help them in the agile world and not really gaining any real experience. That is my concern, not just for agile, but across the board. And so I'm going to say, Patrick, I think us people that have real experience, that are able to really articulate beyond theory, because the one thing that AI can't do is go beyond theory. I think that you're going to see a lot of companies lose contracts. You're going to see a lot of companies lose out because people will learn how to use chat gpt and other things to help them win contracts, to help them gain an advantage. But then when they get in there and to try to deliver, it's going to fall apart. So I think it's going to have an impact, especially on the sales part of agile. But the delivery part, I think, is going to be where the stalwarts, the people that know how to do this stuff, will carve out their niche and be able to hang in that niche and be able to prosper in that niche and prosper greatly in that niche, because as more people fail, it's gonna help to make things better. So one of the things that's happened for me over the years, for example, is I do more agile rehabilitations because I run into more companies that have agile issues, right? They have lots and lots of agile issues. They try to do it, they do that, it just turns out bad, right? So I think that the people who have the chops of actually doing this work are gonna win, because we all can get an advantage from AI. The question is, do you have experience to complement and get beyond the people who's cheating with it? So I think it's definitely a worthy conversation to have, for real. And like you're saying here, lots of discussions around it now, PM space, because things like Chat GPT are showing the ability to take over some of the functions of a PM. Yep, and it's going to do just that for Scrum Masters and every other role. The problem is, the one thing that those things can't do is it can't think out the box. And that's where we will have an advantage, because a lot of people here can think outside of the box in terms of something that AI cannot do. So, um, Asia, there will likely be some kind of mentorship ultimately associated as a follow on from that event. So come to the event. I think you'll get so much from the event. You're going to be solid. But if you want more than that, we'll have a follow up to that. Okay. So that's a good thing. And yes, we did talk about those user stories, splitting user stories. Make sure, Petra, you find a way to get our splitting strategies guide, because that right there is a helpful tool. I use it with clients all the time, right? But we have a splitting strategies guide, right? And Patrick, yeah, humans could never really be replaced, but what what new technology does is it eliminates some skills that's needed, but it creates a void for new skills. So there will be new skills that will be needed because some other skills will go away. So it's like, if you think about coal being something that is no longer a hot skill, you can also think about people who deal in solar technology as being a skill, or clean energy as being somewhat of a skill that people need to have, but it just shifted someplace else. So if you're one of those people who never got away from coal, then you're going to be stuck as things move and change, but that's the way of the world. Things change. Some skills get eliminated while other skills get built upon or grow or come out of nowhere. So you got to always be switching up, training, and making sure that these things work and happen, right? You didn't share the guide, bro? No, you're right. I didn't share the guide. But, it's on our website, beardedeagle.com. I got to find it. So I'm going to look for it, and then I'll make sure that you all can get a copy of it from someplace, because I know I've put it out in the universe. Unfortunately, I just can't drop it in the chat here. So what I'll do is next week I'll make sure that I have a location that you can grab it from. How about that? Next week. Let me send myself a note for that, okay? So next week I'll make sure I make a location for you all to actually go to and grab that guide, because I think that guide will be helpful for you. The many people that have taken my classes, they know, they have it already, and so I'll create some link. It could be just a Dropbox, or it could be on a website or something like that. I'll create a link or something like that. So I'll do that. So yeah, I got it. So next week I'll have that available for you all. Okay. So I'll share that guide next week. It's really simple. Yeah, I can't. I would show it to you now. Let me see. I think I showed it last week. I really do think I showed it last week. Let's see. Let me make this really, really big. Okay. If I make this big, then you all will be able to see it. And so let me share my screen. This right here is that guide that I showed during that time frame. This is the splitting strategies guide. And so I just made sure that I took care of this, and it gives you the basics, and then you get the 11 different strategies on how to split stories or epics. Okay. So that's the guide that I was talking about. But again, I will work on getting you all a link so you can actually be able to roll with that guide. Yeah, just out in the space. It ain't no problem. I'll give it to you. Yeah, so again, we agree. Those future skills, people need to skill up. They need to be agile and adapt. Yeah, that's exactly what they need to do. PMs, no. Everybody needs to be that way. Everybody needs to be that way, because AI is coming for everybody. I firmly believe that the last human job standing will be the AI developer. I think that's the last job, right? We're not there yet, but the last job will be the AI developer. Oh, that's funny, because they're going to need somebody to maintain them. Oh, man. Yeah, you can make a session out of it. Yeah, yeah, that's true. I can actually talk to you all a little bit in more depth about splitting stories. Which again, that's what I'll do. I'll have a session about splitting stories, and then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and talk about some of those options, right, in terms of splitting stories, and then I'll make the guide available then. So maybe that's what we'll talk about next week. That's a good suggestion. I think that's excellent. Okay, any other questions, everybody? Any other questions that you all may have? Yeah, I'm just rambling, because we all good. So any other questions that any of you all may have? Yeah, I'm making sure that I give myself a note. Yeah. Yeah, so next week, we're going to talk about splitting stories. We're going to really talk about that. I think we talked about it a little bit, but I think we can talk about it a little bit more. And then we can probably run through a couple of examples. That might be good, because I'm telling you, man, I hate to say it. I'm running into situation after situation after situation on the ground where people they're not getting this thing right? And I make assumptions. I make assumptions that are pretty bad, that I think everybody knows how to do this stuff. And because I don't want to kind of offend anybody, right? But as I coach, every time I get back and every time I coach, right, it's just like, oh, I'm surprised at it. I really, really am. So yeah, I definitely will talk about that. So yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, but hey Patrick, I've been good out here in NY. You know, I really have, right? I'm usually good wherever I go, because I don't bother nobody, right? I stay my butt. I'm becoming an older guy, so I just stay my butt where I need to stay my butt. I ain't out. I ain't outside on the street kicking it. Mm-mm. Yeah. So I'm assuming you're talking about the splitting. So we'll talk about splitting, next week. I definitely will bring that up as a topic. So I'm good to go with that. I wrote myself a note about it. We'll talk about splitting next week and then go from there. Hot topic. We'll talk about that next week. I don't got no problem with that. We did the whole month of February being about finding the user stories, but yeah, we'll talk specifically about splitting. Yeah, fun topic. All right, then, y'all. Then I think that's about it for us. So, look, here's the deal. This is always a pleasure. I come over here and talk as long as y'all need me to talk and answer as many questions as I need to. But come prepared next week because we're going to talk about splitting. And then probably the week after that, we're going to probably lead into the little conference, the event, um, because everything will be ready by then. Okay. So on that note, everybody, look, y'all have an amazing, amazing week. Don't do anything too crazy. I love y'all dearly. You need anything from me, reach out. Other than that, I'm gonna say peace to you all. Have a wonderful, 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 wonderful time this week. Okay. Y'all have a good one. Thank you.